Own Your Truth with life strategist Laura T. Real advice for regular people. Now, here's Laura.
All right. Hello and welcome to Own Your Truth with Laura T, where we're talking to real advice for regular people. I'm Laura T. Thank you so much for listening. I know there's lots of ways that you can spend your time, and I'm always grateful that you're going to spend the next hour with me. Today, I am so excited to have Glenn Goodwin as my special guest. Glenn has 20 years experience on the radio and is now, in addition to being the network production director on the Family Radio Network, he has his own podcast, Doing Life with Goodwin on the Radio. And so we're going to talk to Glenn today about everything from being in radio to having a podcast to, I know, some of his hobbies. So we're going to ask him some questions about some of the inside information I have, because I will share with my listeners that we are related. So
we are.
Yeah. So Glenn, welcome. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you. Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about my life. I appreciate it.
Oh, I think I'm the one who's excited, because when I talk radio, I'm like, okay, tell me, I want to know everything. I love this. I love this aspect of media. And so with 20 years on the radio, how did that get started? Where did you begin your journey?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So going back, my dad is an audio video guy, has been an audio video guy pretty much my whole life. When I was growing up, there was always gadgets and gizmos and recording equipment around. And our kitchen table was pretty much his little recording studio. So he was always doing something. So I grew up around equipment, recording equipment. And so then what he did was he would go to conventions, and he was their sound guy, and he would record them, and he would do mass duplication of the conferences. And so then as I grew up a little bit, I started doing work for him. So we got to travel quite a lot through the summers, especially. And it was almost like we would go on tour. Almost, it was really cool.
I mean, that's so awesome.
They got an RV. And so it was like, yeah, we're going on this little mini vacation, but it's a tour. And the weekends would, be in different places around the country. And as I grew older, then I started becoming one of his, techie guys. And then he added video to it. So then I became a camera operator, and we were a pretty much full service AV company. And so I worked for him for about 10 years. And after that, he was in the genre of cassette duplication. That was the big thing.
For many listeners, you may not even remember or know about cassettes, but back in our day, we had a little recorder and we had to put the cassette in, press play. So that's very cool. Very cool.
So we did the conferences, but the trends were changing, technology was changing, and he sort of made the transition to CD and everything, but I could tell that things were changing in the industry, and I'd always been interested in radio. So I thought, well, this is probably a good time for me to start looking for something different. And so at one point I came across this part-time overnight weekend opportunity on a local radio station. And it was like, oh, sure, let me just try to see what happens there. And it's an interesting thing because I came at a crossroads that I didn't even know I was at, because literally 30 minutes before I was supposed to go to an interview, I decided not even going to do it. I don't even want to bother. I just don't feel like going. And I'm like, no, I'll just go. So I was at this crossroads in my life, and I, on one little decision, had no clue.
In that moment, you didn't know if you were actually going to go into the interview or you're just going to turn around and go the other way.
That was pretty much it. I was like, I don't even feel like going to this interview. And what happened was I went in and they're telling me about some of the things that the job might, include. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've done some of that. And they're like, you've done that? And I'm like, yeah, I work with that all the time. You do? And so they hired me on the spot. And when can you start? Kind of a thing. Within 3 months, the guy that hired me had taken another job and left. And
Interesting.
so the owner or the vice president promoted me. So within 3 months of starting, I was a supervisor and I was in charge. I had a full-time crew of about 8 and then additional part-time and fill it. So I had this huge crew, and like 3 months into it, I was in the operations side of radio, doing my overnights on weekends and running the control room board. So that's where I got my start. And then
Wow.
it just sort of took off from there over the years.
And so, in talking about direct radio experience, have you found that you go from station to station? Do you tend to stay someplace for a while? How's your career transpired since getting into radio?
So over the past 20 plus years, I think I have to add it up because radio tends to be one of those industries that, some people, I work with a guy that he just celebrated his 40th anniversary here. So he's been at this station that I'm at now for 40
Wow.
years. Me, I've been in the radio business for over 20 years. I think I've been at like 8 different places, something like that.
Okay.
So my first stint was a little over 5 years. Then I spent almost 6 years at my next stint, and then the other ones have been shorter, 2 3 years. There was a couple of stints that were like, yeah, thank you, I don't like this place, it doesn't work, bye bye. It
Got
just
it.
happened that
Yeah.
way. But I'm at the point in my career in life now that it's like I need to not move every, when I married my wife, she's been a gem because she has made about 4 or 5 moves in the last 5 6 years, and we're just like, we're tired of moving. So it's like, this is my goal, is to be here until I retire. I'll put in 15 years or whatever, and that's my goal.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so my next question, maybe you've touched on it a little bit and kind of just sharing how much you've moved, but what is the greatest challenge you find being in the radio industry?
Oh man, that is an interesting question. I technology ever changing, is always
Hmm.
keeping up with technology, but that's a good thing. That's fun to me. Almost all of radio is fun. Maybe not some of the engineering because I don't understand some of the engineering, but most of it is just super fun. Probably continuing to develop new talent, and because with the change of technology, there's been, everybody used to say, well, radio's dying with the new technology, which is so far from the truth. It's still the number one most consumed media that there is. There's, how many thousands of radio stations? They're never going to go away. I mean, AM radio, which we thought, if anything, that's going to go for, it's still very viable. It's just,
Hmm.
they adapt to it. It's still very viable. It does so well for sports radio or talk radio because
Right.
it may not have the deep quality that the FM signal has the ability to do, but it's still very viable. Anyway, but just talent and just finding people sometimes can be a challenge because as the technology changed, so many of the millennials that they're just not in quite as in tune with, hey, I want to go onto the terrestrial FM side of radio because there's so many other
Mm,
options like podcasting, like their little fun internet radio stations and such.
right.
So that's sort of a challenge, is just finding good talent.
And so right now, how do you approach that challenge? How are you finding people to work at the station?
So radio, with it being such a niche audience, there's a lot of people out there that still want to work in radio. It's just finding the right ones for
Okay.
your organization. So there, like I said, there are people out there. It's just finding the right ones. which
Okay.
is sort of a general human resources issue across the board.
Absolutely. And in whether you're in a business or you're on the radio, finding the
Right.
right people for your culture of the culture of your station, I would assume, adds to that challenge and would be similar to finding the right people in a business.
Sure. Yep. I agree.
Awesome. Well, so what's the most rewarding part of radio? What's kept you in radio for this many years?
Oh, wow. Okay. So there are some fun stuff that happen. Now, I've worked the gamut from being on air to being in promotions and doing events and working with the artists. I got to tell you that when we have a concert or an event and you are sitting down backstage with an artist, or it's honestly, it is perks that you cannot buy. And I don't say that, I say that with a humble heart, because there have been times, especially when I was in the promotion side of things, that was my goal, is to create experiences for listeners that they couldn't buy with, and create those with the artists. So we would have, we would get access to the artists for our listeners to do, like, play ping pong with them or hang out, go do just all sorts of fun stuff. And it's things that they're going to remember for the rest of their life. So as I've come across those opportunities and working with the artist management, and the artists actually love doing that kind of stuff.
Really? That's so cool.
Yeah, especially like the day of the event, because they have a lot of downtime.
Okay.
That's sort of built into their day. And so when you can create a 30-minute little deal or an artist meet and greet or something, they actually love meeting their fans. And so it's a lot of fun. So those are some of the fun things so that's rewarding, is when you can create an experience or be there with your listener who you sort of have a relationship with, and they have a relationship with you because they are part of your listenership. They know you from the radio station, or they know your radio station, and then they know the artist that you play there too. So when you can, like, combine all of that and create that experience for them, it's all this win-win-win kind of a situation. So those are always fun, good rewarding times.
That's awesome. Well, so my next question has to be, who has been your favorite artist to meet? And I know that's going to be a hard one for you to answer, but I have to ask it anyway.
Wow. Okay. So most of my career, I've worked in Christian radio. So I've worked with some phenomenal artists over the years. And what's fun is getting to actually know some of them, when they're like, "Oh, hey man, how's it going?" When they see you, I'm like, "What's up?" And ultimately you're a little bit of a fanboy, even, but you're like, they are just real people there too. So I would say some of the artists, Toby Mac, if you're familiar with him, Matthew West. Yeah, Matthew West is an amazing guy. Crowder, he's amazing. Skillet, that's like a hard Christian rock group. They are just so genuine people, and when you are able to see them, work with them, it's just a ton of fun. But there's so many that are just amazing.
That's awesome. All right, so now I'll have to go the other way. I'm not going to ask for any names,
Okay.
but what about? Do you ever find that some artists behave badly, and that it's not as much fun? And again, no names, but maybe an experience where and you're like, what? And an artist was behaving badly.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
So this was many years ago. I was in charge of the VIP meet and greet time. It was set up with the radio station I was working at. But so the artist tent was right by where the meet and greets were going to happen. And the artists were in the tent having their dinner. And when the meet and greet time rolled around, it's like you go through, it's like, "Hey guys, it's time for the meet and greet to start." So there was one group, it was a group, and one of the guys from the group got up and headed out there. The other one took his time. He just waited. he was eating and nobody was gonna pull him away from his food. Okay, fine. So, imagine he's gonna come out when he's done. So a few minutes later, 5, 10 minutes later, after several people have gone through the meet and greet line, here comes the guy that was eating, which is the lead singer. And the guy that had come out previously was, I believe, the bass player. And he just sort of looked around and the other guy showed up and he just walked away. And he was just, I guess he was just done. And I don't know if he felt like he was relieved of his duties or what, and he just walked out of the meet and greet session meeting with the fans. And I'm thinking, oh, that's so not cool how that just worked out, because it, artists tend to let it all go to their head. Sometimes, not everybody, obviously, but there are some. And it was just like he was done. And it was unfortunate because it appeared like he didn't care about the fans, which the fans are what helped get him where he was. And so we sort of lost sight of that. And I think that was one of those unfortunate artists behaving badly type events.
So what do you do in a situation like that? Okay, so the main artist, they're gone. All right, folks. How do you pull that one together?
Luckily, it was a meet and greet that involved a few different groups.
Okay.
And so there were still some there. And I didn't have to say, well, I guess the meet and greet's over. I didn't have to say that. So I've never experienced something quite like that. But that was many years ago. And they are no longer a group anymore. And I wonder why.
Oh, look at that. Maybe a little karma. Just saying. Well, so let's kind of transition from radio over to your podcast. You have this really outstanding, informational, entertaining podcast. You interview really, really cool people. Talk about
because I interviewed you. So yeah, totally.
I'm not sure how I got in that group, but in general. So what had you transition into the podcasting arena?
So, as I work here, on the air, I come across the opportunity to, hey, you want to have such and such artist, record, be on your morning show. Sure. While I'm doing that, I might as well record them and throw it into something that everybody can listen to a little bit deeper, or that opportunity exists like that. There are some artists that maybe we don't even play, but they're, play on the air, but yet they're an entertaining individual. People know who they are. Maybe we're getting ready to add a song from them. And so when opportunities arise, do you want to, talk to them? Sure. I'm going to record it and I'm going to package it into a podcast. And it's interesting. And that's pretty much the way I perceive some of those, but it's not always just artists, because I interviewed you, my podcast is sort of set around anybody that has an interesting story to tell. And so that's the way I packaged it and thought of it, of doing life. I'm just doing life with Goodwin on the radio. And so it really isn't theme based, because I've had actors and obviously musicians. I've had life coaches and consultants, and I've had several reality TV people that
I was diving into that next, because you had a little Survivor guest on.
Survivor. I've got Big Brother guests that I've had on.
Oh, right, Big Brother too. That's right. We talked about Big Brother.
So it's just interesting people that I meet or run across, and it's a fun story to tell that people like to hear from. And it's like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And luckily so far, I've had a lot of guesses out of it. So it's great.
That's awesome. So who is the most, I won't say interesting, but someone that you kind of were like, wow, this turned out to be a really great show?
So if you don't know this, Laura, about me yet, I'm a big fan of the Dukes of Hazzard.
I actually have a Dukes of Hazzard car question on here for you. I do.
Totally get to that. So one of my, I grew up watching Dukes of Hazzard, John Schneider, Bo Duke is like my, and I've had the opportunity to work with him on 2 or 3 of occasions, and he is such a cool dude. And so I took one of the interviews that I did on the air and I packaged it into, and that's what I did with my very first podcast. I'm like, this is an old interview that I have that I had, recorded, but I just created a podcast out of it because it was fun and it was sort of my boy idol, Bo Duke. And so that's how I kicked off my podcast series with my very first episode was one of my interviews that I had done with him. And so that was stellar. One of the other ones that I really enjoyed doing was for all the fans that maybe somebody's a fan of reality TV, but Christmas Abbott was on 2 seasons of Big Brother. And that Big Brother is like it's my guilty pleasure show. But I love the social aspect or the interaction and that aspect of that show and how people can be forced into a situation and how they react and act.
It's fascinating,
it
right?
is fascinating.
Fascinating.
And so the whole Big Brother concept, I love it. And I've watched it for years and years and years. So I reached out to her. She was a great character, a great person in 2 different seasons. I reached out to them. They replied, sure. And she was such an interesting interview because she has done so much. She was the very first NASCAR girl on the NASCAR pit crew.
Wow.
So she set a record as that. She's been on obviously the 2 seasons of Big Brother. She has her own fitness and weightlifting channel on YouTube, and she does personal training and those kinds of things. And so that was a fascinating interview, and she and I have been able to keep in touch since then. And that was a lot of fun. And so, at some point we're going to do a follow-up with her and just sort of catch people up on what's going on in her life. So those are a couple of the ones that sort of stand out to me.
That's awesome. So, okay, now we have to go back to the Dukes of Hazzard,
Okay.
because I obviously have seen pictures of the car. So that my question was, so what is the love behind the car? It's the show. Talk to me a little bit about your interest in cars. And again, is it just Dukes of Hazzard related? I thought I saw interest in like other types of cars as well.
It's mostly Dukes of Hazzard.
Mostly
related.
Dukes of Hazzard. Okay.
So my office at home, which is also my studio, is painted orange. There's a shelf full of memorabilia that I have just collected, and I wish that I still had just a few of my childhood toys that I had back then, but I've been able to replace some of them just through collecting. But I have unfortunately spent quite a lot of money on collecting for Dukes of Hazzard items. Obviously, the ultimate goal would be to own a 69 Dodge Charger, which I do not have yet, but that would be the ultimate fan dream come true. But I've been to, and with working with John Schneider, and I've been able to be around and be in different places where they've had the different events, and was able to attend one of the movie premieres that John was in, and do a red carpet event and interview him from the red carpet. So that was a ton of fun.
Very cool.
So we've had some, but yeah, that's my fanboy coming out with the Dukes of Hazzard.
I love it. I remember Dukes of Hazzard every Friday night. It was Dukes of Hazzard, Dallas, and Falcon Crest. That was the lineup for Friday night. A little embarrassed that I still remember that, but it is true. All right.
Awesome.
So coming back to the podcasts, there's lots of people out there who are starting to either create their own podcast or thinking about it. What advice do you have for people who are just getting now into the podcast space?
I would say figure out what you want it to be, whether you want it to be down a specific topic or if you want it to be more broad. I decided to go with the broad side of things because I guess I could have made a Dukes of Hazzard podcast, but eventually people are going to get tired of hearing me talk about that. So I just wanted it to be everyday people and because I run across interesting people. And so that's the direction that I thought I could take mine. But there may be somebody that really is specific with what their focus is. I could do a radio podcast actually. That could have been
Right.
a side podcast or a separate that I could have done focused on that, because there are so many aspects in radio over the years that you learn about. And so I would say that would be the biggest thing. Of course, talk about what you know. Talk
Mm,
about what you can have input into, or talk about and have guests in what interests you. Because if it's interesting to you, then you're going to want to listen to it. You're going to want to pay attention to it. And if it's not interesting to you, it'll probably show in
right.
your podcast. So I would say that. The other thing I would say would be is be consistent. And I put one out every week, an episode. Some people put out more than one a week. Some people put out one every 2 weeks or a month, whatever it is. Just so as you create a following and you start telling your friends and your family, or if you promote it on social media, so there's an expectation of what it is that that podcast does and
Right.
when it will be available. So those are the two things I would say to give advice on a new podcast host.
Awesome. And in terms of getting listeners, any suggestions or recommendations? There's so many podcasts out
There
there.
are,
How
yeah.
do you bring people to, Goodwin on the Radio podcast?
Yeah, that's an ever I don't know, it's just sort of always there to where you always want to try to grow it. And I don't have all the answers for that, because that's one thing that I just started at the end of the year. So mine's only been going for, what is it, 5-6 months. And but I think that consistency helps
Yeah.
with the growth.
Mm-hmm.
But sharing it on social media, when you have a guest, asking them to share it too, because
Right.
then it opens up a whole new set of ears and their circle of influence. But honestly, friends and family as well, or if you know of somebody that might have a specific interest in one of the topics that you're doing, make sure you shoot it off to them. There are podcast groups on Facebook that you can share. Hey, check out my latest. Or if you've got somebody specific that has dealt with something and you're part of a group on Facebook, or you can search a group on Facebook or
Mm-hmm.
Instagram or whatever, shoot it to them, join that group just for the networking side of it, just to continue to grow it and get it out to more listeners. Currently, and again, my podcast is only 5 months old, but it's pretty cool when I look at the countries that I believe it's 6 different countries of people
That's awesome.
that have somebody's listened to my podcast. I have no idea how they came across it, but they did. But of course, using the platforms is pretty simple to do now,
Right.
where you can throw it on one platform and they share it to 5 other platforms where people are listening. I think, let's see, Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Anchor, I think, are my 3 most listened to.
Okay.
The platforms that people listen mostly on, when I was looking at some of those numbers just the other day. So making sure that you're not just pigeonholed just to one platform, that's good too, is make sure you get it out there on as many platforms as you can.
Awesome. So how are you using, and I bring this up because I do follow you on Facebook and on Instagram, you are like the meme king. How are you using social media? I mean, I just find your stuff so entertaining and so fun. It is what I look forward to every day. So
Good.
how are you using social media to either enhance, listeners, or even just grow your following?
Right. So my personal network is people mostly in the industry, in the radio industry, or personal friends or family or whatever. So I actually have my own personal page, but then I created the Goodwin on the Radio page, which then is my sort of, okay, this is what I'm going to do over here. So I actually do anything and everything that shows my personality, which you're sort of talking about, the fun memes. So I probably need to start charging people as they come across. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But
Find a new revenue source.
Yeah, totally. But you know what? I love funny memes. And so I'm constantly searching for funny memes every once in a while. If I create one, I'm going to share it on Goodwin on the Radio. And I share some of that on my personal page. But when I share some of those on my personal page, I'll even say, for more funny memes, follow me at Goodwin on the Radio. So I'm even telling my own personal network, hey, if you want to follow that, go over there and follow it, because there's even more content. And it's, social network. Instagram and Facebook are the two that I use the most. I throw things on Twitter just because I can connect to it, but I really don't use Twitter. But Instagram obviously is one of the greatest places for memes, because that's pretty much all Instagram is either memes or video. But right. I know, and I haven't gotten into TikTok, and I haven't gotten into some of those other ones, at least not yet. But I mean, I'm sure that I probably could if I wanted to take more time with it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the greatest challenge, right? Is when you're doing what you love, right? You're on the radio, you've got your podcast, all of these things take time, and yet it's to help grow what you love, but it also takes you away from the thing that you love. How do you create balance in your world? You started telling me before we started recording, like all of the things that you're involved in right now. Yeah. How do you create balance in your world, given all the different platforms you're on, the different radio stations you're on? How do you do that?
Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes I'm tired. Like last night, I was like, it's 8:00. I'm going to bed. I get up at 4 or something every day to come in and start the morning show at the radio station I'm at that I do mornings. And then after I get off the air, then I do the production here. And my goal is to be out of here every day by 2. And so that's, it's basically a normal work day. Then I go home and I record, and I do middays for a radio station in North Dakota. And then the podcast, I work it in when I can, because what I usually do is I record out anywhere from 1 to 3 to 4 weeks on a lot of the podcasts. So I've always got that. I mean, I've got a couple of unedited recordings right now. So if I find time or a little downtime and I want to pull it up and sort of edit it out, that way I'm not like pressed for time to get it ready for posting. And I post mine and I schedule them, scheduling those kind of things. I schedule them to post every Monday morning at 8 a.m. And usually, like right now, I think I only have 1 week ready to go. So I'm getting a little nervous because in 2 weeks, what am I going to do? No, but I'll get them done.
Right.
But at least so I'm not like behind the 8 ball. I'm doing that, and I'll just work it in, because again, it's entertainment to me because I like it. And so when you're passionate about something or you're having fun with something, then it's not work.
It doesn't feel as much like work, right?
Yeah. So when I'm doing radio or I'm doing the podcast, it's not so much as work as, man, I'm having fun, which makes it a lot easier to do.
That's awesome. And there are so few people who are creating their life experience that way. That's something I talk a lot about on my podcast. And when I'm being interviewed is, creating this ideal life experience. And so with that, we'll segue over to some of the things that I read are your hobbies. And then, so we'll talk about the other things outside of work that fill you up, and sort of close on those activities. But did I see antiquing, that you and Carrie do some antiquing? So talk a little bit about that and your finds.
So all right. So we love going to auctions.
Auctions are what it was. Yeah.
Well, so we love going to auctions, but we have a booth at an antique mall. Okay. Because we decided we love the auctions, and there are so many things that we like to buy, but if we just bought stuff for the fun of it, our house would be a wreck. We would be hoarders. So we realized, a lot of those things we could make money by buying at an auction and reselling. So we've been doing this for the last several years because we like auctions so much. We decided to go down the resale route and make some money doing it. So it basically provides a hobby that supports itself.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the way. And we usually go to our booth, maybe stop by 30 minutes, an hour each weekend just to check it out, maybe rearrange some things, put in some new stuff. And it pretty much just sort of, well, I should say the goal is to pay for the hobby.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that we have more inventory now than we've sold in a recent while, but that's the goal. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, especially if it's a booth, it's been a little bit hard during COVID where, for a long time, people weren't even going out and going
Right.
shopping. So now hopefully
Yeah.
you'll see that business pick up. That's so fun. I love that.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
So,
That's
and
great.
we just like the collectibles and the fun stuff, and it's pretty much when we're on an auction, it's like, oh, if I like that and I think I can make some money on it, okay, cool, let's buy it. It just makes it fun.
That's awesome.
And,
I like
it's
that.
decorated our house pretty nicely too. We do keep
You
quite a
do
few
keep
things.
some of it. You do
Yeah.
keep some of it. Well, with all of these moves, you get a chance to mix things up, right? Like you can take
That's
things
true.
from your booth and then switch them out at your
Yes.
house.
Yeah, well, hopefully no more moves. That's the goal. Yeah, but yeah.
All right. So then the last question I have again is sort of
Yes.
on that. Did I see that your sci-fi? No, it was
Let's see.
your favorite television shows are true crime
Oh,
series.
yes. Okay, so
So
my
talk
wife.
about this.
Yes. So my wife is a criminology major, has a degree, and I just am also fascinated with true crime. And so we absolutely love documentaries and true crime stuff. I know it's just sort of weird, but we do. And so we live in Wisconsin now. I don't know if you ever watched Making a Murderer.
No.
Okay, so it's a 2-series long documentary about a murder suspect in Wisconsin. Anyway, so we've been there. We went to the location. We've like, oh, this is where this happened, and we've done all that. But we also decided for our 5th anniversary, we took a trip to California, and it became a true crime trip, basically. Because what we did, we went to all these different locations where true crimes had happened. This sounds horrible, doesn't
No,
it?
you could this could be a podcast. Like
It
this
totally
could be its own show that you and Carrie could do together.
There are true crime podcasts. There are many of them, but we went to the Nicole Brown Simpson murder scene. We went to.
Did you really?
We went up in the hills where the Manson murders had taken place. We went to, let's see, the Zodiac Killer, like where one of those murders had taken. I mean, we were just fascinated by it all. And yeah, so we like true crime. It's just so interesting.
This is so cool. Now you said you went to California, but did you mean to do that? Like, did you map this stuff out in advance, or was it like, okay, we're here, let's check it out. And then once you started, you couldn't stop?
It was pretty much mapped out in advance.
Yeah.
Well, and we went to Alcatraz, and we,
Right.
It was like, we didn't totally mean to do this, but when we're like, this is a true crime trip. It's
that
like,
is so
how did that
fun.
sort of happen? But you know what? We both were like, that was the best trip ever. And to top it off, when we came out of Alcatraz, we walked back to our car, and our car had gotten broken into. So it was like, so now we're part of true crime. So it was
Are you serious? That's crazy.
It was just weird, but it was just the most fun trip ever. I know. I think we should like package that and sell that package and say, these are the places and how to get there.
No,
and
I think people would be so into that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we went to where OJ's house was, OJ Simpson's house, which had been torn down. We went to where the Menendez murders took place. I'm
Seriously?
Serious. We're sitting out front of this house. Yeah, and we're like, and their front door was up, and we're like, yep, right there's the cow, like that's where they were. I mean, it was it was really, it was a lot of fun.
Now, so I don't know if I would be a little creeped out like doing
Yeah,
that, like if I would be able to, but I find that so cool. My daughter would be so into it. She loves true crime. I mean, she will
totally.
sit there and watch hours upon hours.
I would totally take that trip and be like somebody's tour guide. We would totally do that. That would be so much fun. But the thing about it was when we did it and we were in these locations, it almost became surreal because
Yeah.
you've seen these places on TV and then you look, we sat there and we looked up where this murder took place of the Zodiac killer and then the Zodiac supposedly walked down this street, and we're like, this is the road right here's what I mean, and
I
this
have
is the
goosebumps.
street
I
side.
wasn't even there.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was, I don't know, it was surreal, but it was so fun. I
That
don't
is
know.
so cool. All right. So
Anyway,
Glenn,
sorry.
no, I love this. This is awesome. And as we wrap up, just know Glenn and Carrie are available for tours of
Yes,
true crime
totally
sites.
do that. Yes,
How can my listeners get in touch with you, follow you, learn more about you, listen to you? Tell us how we can stay in touch with you.
for sure. Okay, so my podcast is on pretty much the platforms, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, probably name it, you're going to find it. Just search Doing Life with Goodwin on the Radio, the podcast. That's the name of it. I don't know why, because it just came to me. Are you sure you want to do that name? Yeah, sure. I don't have anything else.
Yeah.
Doing Life with Goodwin on the Radio, the podcast. And then if they want to find me on social media, at Goodwin on the Radio on Facebook or on Instagram is the best place to follow me there. And it's got some of the info. The radio station that I work full time and I do the morning show for is the Family FM radio network. It's a Christian radio here in Wisconsin, stations all across the state. And then I'm on, it's actually 103.7 The Connection in North Dakota on the midday show. If you want to hear me on middays, and you can find that all online too. And email, even if somebody wanted to reach out via email, pretty easy. Glenn Goodwin, 2 N's, Glenn with 2 N's, Glen Goodwin at gmail.com. I was the original Glenn Goodwin
Awesome.
at Gmail.
At Gmail.
I was the first Glenn Goodwin on that. Yeah. So I don't have any numbers. It's just my name at gmail.com.
Awesome. So reach out to Glenn, listen to his podcast. Glenn, thank you so much for being on Own Your Truth with Laura T. It's always awesome to spend time with you. This was so much fun. Thank you for coming on today.
Blast. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't tell people how we're related.
Oh, I thought I mentioned. I didn't.
Or you did, or maybe I was thinking. I missed it.
So Glenn is married to my beautiful cousin, Carrie, and they live out in the Midwest. So I only get to see them this way via internet and online. And so, yes, it is my dad's twin sister's daughter, is how we're related. So just I keep telling them they need to come to the East Coast to visit us so that
whenever
we can see
I
each other in
refer
person.
to you, I always say my cousin Laura. And even when I'm talking to my wife, Carrie, I'm like, my cousin Laura, and I'm gonna go talk to my cousin Laura.
Well, and all 3 of our birthdays are like literally right there on top of each other.
Your birthday and my birthday are the same day, which that was pretty awesome to find
I thought
out.
that was so cool.
Yes. My wife's is the next day. Yeah.
And I didn't know that before this year, which is so bizarre. And I'm like, wait a second, no wonder we're connected.
Yeah, it is.
That's awesome.
Thank you
Glenn,
so much.
Thank you for being on today. And again, I can't wait till the next time.
Sounds good.
For all my listeners, thank you. Check out Own Your Truth on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.